Hey everybody, this is Zach Mullins from the Grip Show, and going to get into the wrist wrench. That's going to be the handle for today that we're going to check out. This is a 2 3/8 inch diameter wrist wrench from Arm Assassin Strength Shop. So I'm going to get into some of the competition results on this handle, some of the training benefits of the handle, and kind of explain some differences in it versus a rolling handle. And just going to get a video going on the wrist wrench here. So if I refer to the notes real quick, this handle comes in. I have two scales here. Both scales had it right at 2.3 pounds. So the handle itself, pretty small, pretty affordable. I believe for Arm Assassin, I think they're around $40. So, I mean, for $40, you kind of have a thick bar tool that also targets the fingers and wrists a little bit differently than a rolling handle. But for the price, if you're looking to train a Thomas Inch dumbbell or any kind of thick bar lifts or just strengthen your wrist, it's popular. This is a popular handle for rock climbers, also arm wrestlers, with the ability to hook up to a cable machine, pulley attachment, different cupping, wrist, all that stuff. So a lot of uses within one handle. As far as the Grip Sport International database goes, there's been around 160 to 170 lifts logged in a competition setting on this handle, which isn't a lot, but a lot of really big lifters have put up some huge numbers with this handle. So just to give everybody an idea, generally with this being the same diameter with the handle, the same as the inch dumbbell, there's always that kind of like ratio comparison of how much do you have to lift on this in order to be able to lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell. And it's going to vary for different people depending on their hand size and their individual hand strengths, whether it's their thumb, their wrist, their fingers, and all that. Generally, most people would say around 100 pounds. So in general, if you're lifting 100 pounds on this handle, you should be able to lift the Thomas Inch dumbbell or have a pretty good shot at lifting the Thomas Inch dumbbell replicas that are out there, assuming they're, the same weight as the official Thomas Inch dumbbell, being 172 pounds or over, or 78 kilos, So, with that being said, that might vary. You might have somebody that does 100 on this and doesn't have a lot of lifts on the inch dumbbell. You might have somebody that can lift the inch dumbbell and maybe their wrist or some aspect of their hand is a little bit weak. So they're not going to put up as your bigger numbers on this. But pretty much it's a good ballpark guess, and I've found it to be fairly accurate. So none of this is ever going to be like one size fits all and perfect, but for what it's worth, that's a pretty accurate statement in comparison. Getting into these lifts. So the current Grip Sport International record on this, pulled to a 6-inch height, which is the, competition standard for lifting on this. It's not a lockout call. It's not necessarily a full range of motion. It could be, depending on the lifter and what pull height they're doing, but or the distance they're pulling it, whether they're standing on blocks and how tall they are. But 6 inches pull height. And Justin Majors out of Canada has lifted 127 pounds on this in a competition. Right behind him, Eric Roussane at 122 pounds. Eric's another person that has a very solid arm wrestling career and one of the best, Grip Sport arm lifting careers. So Eric is a very good, I guess, sort of almost like a focus, but, Eric gives us a good representation of like what a solid lift on this handle is, or I shouldn't even say what a solid lift is. I mean, Eric's a very high level competitor. So it's not like we have a list of like 10 people in town and they're all really like small numbers. So we don't really know what that ceiling is. When you get people like Justin Majors lifting 127 pounds, Eric Roussane doing 122, Trey DeMarteau and Jason Denji tied at 114 pounds at the 24 North American Grip Sport Championship. So when you have those caliber of lifters pulling on this, you start to realize, okay, that is mostly going to be the top end on this handle. So if you're toying or, flirting with numbers in that 120 pound range or over, that's world class. That's, very elite. That's, a ridiculous lift. Anything, over 100 pounds, I would say is pretty damn good, right? We said that, this roughly at 100 pounds is about like lifting the inch dumbbell. So, in general, to the average person, you're not seeing a lot of people just walk up and pick that up. As far as grip specialists, strongman competitors, arm wrestlers, things like that, you're going to get, a higher percentage of people picking it up compared to the general population, but it's still going to be the minority of, who's trying it. It's not a commonly lifted dumbbell when it comes to everyday, just in passing. So that kind of covers most of the stats on it. Just as far as, big lifts, comparing it to the inch dumbbell. Now I kind of want to get into sort of the comparison to a rolling handle and just some of the training benefits. And I'm going to keep this very brief and pretty straight to the point. So whenever you're lifting on a rolling handle, you have obviously the axis of that handle is going to be placed right here in the center. So with that axis, and you'll see what I'm saying, I'm going to lift here on this short loading pin just to do a little demo. But with this rolling handle, the handle is going to roll. But with that being in the center axis here with the frame, when this goes down, once it basically hits that bottom portion, it's not going to continue to spin that direction. So the torque is here as it rotates towards the thumb. Then it gets basically to where it's going to hit the bottom of the hand, and then it's going to try to break out through the bottom of your hand. So yeah, you can kind of keep a somewhat neutral wrist, kind of try to cup it depending on your strength. You can kind of go into extension with it as long as you have a good, wrap around it and your thumb is strong. So all of that, these are all factors in such a very, simple lift. What makes the wrist wrench different is the rolling handle just wants to go out through the opening. So when we are here and we're lifting on this, as I get to the point where I'm up, and it's at that point, this handle is just going to go towards the opening. And if this were much heavier and I was reaching a maximal point, it's going to eventually kind of just pop out or spin through here. So yeah, it's spinning, but I'm not feeling, it's more just downward pull. So it's almost downward pull to this point, and then it stops. It doesn't continue to rotate. So when I'm up, it's going to kind of like line up and just kind of go down and be good to go from there. When we get into the wrist wrench, so the way you would be using this is rolling this up. Now we don't have the axis in the center of that handle. It's coming around. So it's coming around the outside. So when this hooks up, you would want to roll this to the thumb side to get the full amount of torque and power on this. So when we're here, you roll this up, you're going to go to lift. Different from the rolling handle, when you get to that bottom portion, because this strap is pulling on the outside of that, this handle is going to continue to torque and torque and torque if you can't, stop it. So it's really going to hit, your wrist, the fingers, and even the thumb in a different way, because it's torquing in a different fashion, and it's going to, it's just going to be a completely different lift, even though they're both in the kind of thick bar realm. So just as an example for this, if I'm here, I have this wrapped up, it's on the thumb side. If I were to mess up and roll this the wrong way with this straps coming off on the finger side, that is going to make it completely easy. I could lift, triple the weight, quadruple the weight, whatever, because that's just spinning into your hand. And when it spins into your hand, it just kind of like bites on itself, right? So make sure you're rolling this up. Straps are going to the thumb side. And when you're here, this is going to create a lot more torque this way. So this is a lightweight, so I'm able to control it better as I'm talking. But it's really torquing me this way and trying to break that wrist open. So I have to keep this engaged, keep that thumb tight, and just keep a really, tight, just vice grip lock on that. So that would be the biggest difference as far as the training stimulus or what you're going to get versus a rolling handle. Like I said, this will get to a point where it just stops. Then it kind of just wants to pull out through the bottom. You get here, rolling this up, straps to the thumb side. And as you get here, if you don't have the strength to maintain that position, it's just going to keep going, keep going, keep going until it just completely breaks your posture and breaks all your, structure to complete the lift. Hopefully that makes sense. Things you can do with this, there are, like a lot of other lifts, you could go for maximal weight. You could just try to work volume and maybe build a base for it. One of the things I do a lot with this handle is basically like overcoming isometrics. So I'll do some timed holds with this because I'm doing a timed hold while the handle is almost actively fighting me. So that's when I really feel that, like, versus doing holds on this or this, I think if you're doing timed holds on something like this, I'm not going to say you're wasting your time, but you might as well just be lifting regular, or I don't know, doing the actual reps versus, spending too much time with a timed hold on this. Whereas with this, creating that different stimulus of, torquing, and almost like the same way when you're closing a gripper, it's sort of dynamic in the sense that you close the gripper is actively trying to pry your hand back open. And if you let go, the gripper is going to, pop back open, right? Same thing with this. You have to stay engaged and you have to fight this thing, because the second you let up, it's just going to, pop everything open and be done. The lift's gone. So I really like using implements like this for like overcoming isometrics, doing timed holds, just things of that nature. You could even kind of maybe lighten it up a little bit and do kind of some, wrist curls with this, because it's creating a greater torque. So that might give you a little bit more benefit on your wrist curls. The one thing I will say is when you're training with this wrist wrench, considering that the torque is so high and it's hitting your wrist in that fashion, the weight isn't going to be nearly as heavy as what it would be on a rolling handle, right? So with this handle, there's people, hitting, upwards of 250, 260 on this handle. And I just mentioned right now, the, stats for this are about 50% of that or so, pretty close. So with that, yes, you're hitting a certain portion of the hand, wrist, fingers that makes this more difficult from a max weight standpoint, but that's where the lifter is going to have to adjust and figure out, where it fits in their training or what they need to work on. And I'm just going to use some very basic examples. For example, on the rolling handle, let's say you have somebody that is like a big, strong man. They are, they're competing in strongman, maybe big hands, whatever. They might lift way better on this because maybe they haven't had to actually use that wrist flexion or had their, they haven't been working the wrist, as much. A lot of the lifts are just max lifts, but they're typically smaller diameters, whatever. But generally they lift on axles and other things. So this isn't going to be too foreign of like a stimulus they're going to have to hit. So they might lift really big on this. And then you might think, man, they lifted so big on that, they're probably going to, dominate the wrist wrench. And maybe it kind of exposes that weak link in the chain where maybe they don't have that strong of a wrist. They just have, big, strong hands, and, everything in here is not really able to hold up or maintain that position. You might run into the opposite. You might get somebody that is a rock climber, and I'm using very exaggerated examples here. You might get a rock climber that is killing it on this handle, and they train with this handle, or an arm wrestler that really trains with this. And I hate to say arm wrestler because they're generally a little bit bigger. Not that there aren't lighter weight classes, but I'm going with the climber example because generally the goal is to not be, stupid heavy or carry a bunch of muscle mass. So when we get into a climber, maybe they have just ridiculous, finger, thumb strength, and, everything from here down is just, like top notch. But maybe when they get on this handle, the hand is so strong, but maybe their lats, their bodies, or maybe their portions of their arm, maybe they're just not used to picking up 200 plus pounds off the floor. So their body actually becomes the limiting factor. So, whether it be a strong man that's killing it on this handle, but has a weakness exposed on this, this could be a training tool for that. And then maybe, you could lift heavier on this, but maybe this is something you need to kind of, up how much you can hold single hand because the weight's going to be so much heavier. So whether it's, targeting the grip, targeting the body more and hitting a different aspect of the hand, you're going to have different benefits of both. But like I said, for $40 and for what this does and how much it helps you in training, there's almost no reason someone shouldn't have it. So this is actually, Arm Assassin Strength Shot brand. I have a lot of their stuff. I'll continue to be doing videos, showing how I use it. And it's not just me plugging random stuff. This is stuff I use. This is stuff that I, will have like custom ordered sometimes, or, always trying to make changes to whatever. But yeah, this is just basic wrist wrench for like $40 off the site, but a great tool. I'm also going to bring up that for this upcoming year, the last major competition this was held in was the 2024 North American Grip Sport Championships. And that's where a lot of that data came from. This year, this is actually going to be in the International King Kong Grip Challenge. So with that being like the biggest competition when it comes to grip and multi-venue across the world, we are going to get, probably triple to quadruple the sample size of top-notch lifters across the world lifted on this handle. So by the end of this year, this records list could look completely different, and everything under that is going to be shaken up and completely, shifted once, a couple hundred entries get put in on this handle. So that'll be exciting to kind of see where everybody stands. I'm actually going to be training with this today. That's part of the reason I filmed this video. So if I have time to do it, I will add the video of me maxing out on this and throw that in here at the end of the video just to see what I hit. I have not competed on this handle in competition. I've only used it in training. And even then, I've done more holds, like I mentioned, than I have done just, flat maxing it out. So today will really kind of be just a test run to see where I'm at with it. And just kind of get a starting point with it. So that kind of covers it for the wrist wrench. The other thing I would mention as a benefit is I mentioned here, maybe we're getting up over, 200 some pounds, mid 200s with a handle like this. It's very common in strength sports or any athlete. We deal with injuries and, you don't always feel 100% or something, maybe feels fatigued on certain days. Let's say a lifter was having, back issues, back injury. This might be a better way to get some training in because you're not going to overload the body. Like I said, this about 50% of, this roughly. What you lift on this, you kind of do about 50% on this handle roughly. That could always vary, depending on person, but with that weight overall, still hitting the grip hard, hit that torque that it's creating and fighting that is actually, a better torquing and rolling stimulus than the rolling handle. Or at least it's slightly exaggerated and different with the way that strap pulls on the outside. But if you wanted to kind of save your back some volume or save some reps because your back's messed up or you have an injury, this is a way that you could still blast your wrist, blast the grip, and get all that same work in, but not, screw yourself up more or further the injury or whatever the case may be. So it does have its uses where, situations like that, where you can kind of, take it easier on the body, still hit the hands, target different parts of the wrist and fingers versus a rolling handle, or, supplement the two together in some way in your training. But a lot of benefit to using it and a lot of stuff that can be done. Like I said, arm wrestlers will hook this up to pulley machines. You can do thumbless lifts on it. Thumbless lifts are, very difficult because if you get here with a thumbless lift, it just wants to pop out completely. So you get here, you would just roll this up. You just take your thumb off instead of being here, and you'd go underneath and just cup it like this. This is really hard because that's all, a lot of stress on the fingers trying to maintain this position and then also right there in the wrist. So, a lot of variations, a lot of good uses. And later this year, we're going to kind of find out where everybody stands in the world on this thing because strongest people in the world when it comes to grip and wrist strength will probably be lifting on this handle, or most of them, I would say. Always going to be a few that maybe don't compete or can't work it out or whatever, but yeah. As far as notes go, that's pretty much all I have. We covered the past competition this was used in, covered kind of some of the records in competition, pricing, how much it weighs, and kind of the benefits of it compared to this rolling handle here. So, stay tuned here at the end of the video, and I'll hopefully be able to pop in me maxing out on this thing just to get a starting point because I have not maxed on one of these in a couple years. So, and never in competition. So, thanks for checking the video out. And if you ever get a chance, go to Arm Assassin Strength Shop and check out some of the stuff. And especially, if you don't have one, grab a wrist wrench. And that can help you host a venue for King Kong this year if you have the other implements, obviously. But, or if you just want something, to prepare for that competition, this handle's a great one to get because it's going to be in the competition and you'll be lifting on the actual thing for your training. You'll know where you're at. So, thank you guys. If there's anything you feel like I left out or any way that you use the wrist wrench that I didn't mention, feel free to drop that in the comments below and let me know what you think. But that'll be it for this one. Thank you guys. Left wrist and left fingers didn't feel too good around 80 to 90 pounds in that range. So I'm just kind of continued upwards with the right hand. And right now we're just over 100 pounds. So going to give this a go. Did not feel too good, but that probably would have made a 6-inch height in competition, but far from a good lift in my opinion as far as lockout stuff goes. But that is a decent little starting point.